Good day, grade 12. Today we will focus on English first additional language, and our focus today will merely be on 2 of our 8 short stories. Right? In our sessions, you've noted that Ms. France covered 6 of the 8, and I'm going to cover the last 2 of the 8 short stories. Now, please, grade 12, do not have this idea that you can go and spot which of the questions will be in, or short stories will be in the exam. There is no guarantee. Know all 8 of the short stories. I find these 8 short stories so beautiful because it gives us a total different description of what happens. It creates imagery in our minds. So you need to be totally au fait with the stories and note exactly what is happening, what is important, what are the themes, what is the title, and how is it relevant to the story. So our focus today will be on village people and on the fur coat, right? And village people, grade 12, obviously I find it to be a beautiful story because it speaks about the humanity of people through their survival of poverty, and also it speaks of hope that people have during this particular time. So when we look at the title in village people, right? So it explores the suffering of the village people. So the title is very clear. It is totally about the village people and what they encounter during this time in their life. The setting we note is in Botswana, in a rural farming village. It is at a time of heavy drought, and very little development is being taken place in rural areas. So automatically, it contributes to this idea of poverty. Things are too much for the people staying in this particular village in Botswana. Right? So it gives us also the idea of the structure of the story. But the structure of this story is divided into 3. So we note the very first part of it is an essay about poverty. And here, the narrative focuses on the poverty that the people endure and coming back to the hope, coming back to the humanity in the story in the first part of the essay. The second part is about the old woman and how she faints, obviously, because she is hungry. But it also speaks of the kindness of the people in the story to assist the old woman. And the last aspect of the story is the summer sun. And obviously the summer sun contributes to this idea of heat. It contributes to the idea of drought. But it also comes back to the idea of hope. Remember, we note the saying, the sun will shine again. That, grade 12, comes back to the idea of hope. So we note that the people in the village had hope. We note that the people, what they endure in the first part of the story was the poverty. Right? Their shoes, which is caked with mud, as the narrator tells us. It is this people who still has hope when we note in the summer sun, when they go up to go and pray. There is hope, grade 12. So it's important that we understand and interpret the story properly. So the narrator, grade 12, we note that it is a first-person narrator. So she tells us the story. But this first-person narrator is at the same time also our main character. This we find and understand in the last aspect when she tells us a story while she's living in her family and her experience as someone living in the village and obviously enduring the poverty. She is also seen as the hero in the story of the old woman because it is the narrator who comes and provides the old woman with food. And the repayment, grade 12, from the old woman's family is that bucket of water. That water is the only valuable resource that they have, which means that there is value to the water that they are giving. It is the only thing they can give to say thank you, coming back to kindness. And then, like I said, she has first-hand experience of poverty in the village. She lives with a family who also endures what they are going through. In poverty, she sees the mothers sitting there with their babies who die of starvation and malnutrition. So it's important that we note what happens in the story contributes to the big idea of poverty. But even though they are enduring poverty, there's hope, there's humanity and kindness. They are still gentle with one another. They still respect one another, even though they are going through this poverty. Then we note in the story, she speaks of, in the very first line, poverty has a home in Africa, like a quiet second skin. This obviously coming back to figures of speech. Obviously. However, it also tells us that it is a part of the people. If poverty has a home in Africa, grade 12, clearly it comes back to personification. She's personifying poverty, which means if there's a home in Africa, it is rooted in Africa. It is a part of Africa. Like a quiet second skin, it is a part of them. They've adapted to it. They've adjusted to it. It is who they clearly are. So it is a part of the people in Africa. It's a part of the people living in the village. And it obviously does not move because they have adapted to it. So when we move on, we look at the themes in the story. And these themes are the things I've mentioned the whole time. I've mentioned poverty to you. And obviously we note poverty in the very first part. The fact that the people eat the same food every day at the same time. The fact that babies die of starvation and malnutrition. Coming back to poverty. The fact that the old woman faints for food is poverty. The fact that their shoes are caked in mud, poverty, grade 12. So it comes back to this idea of that the people have very little, however, they have hope, our last theme. There is some sense of hope. But our second theme is drought. Obviously, when there's a drought, there's a lack of water, which also contributes. If there's a lack of water and there's a drought, it means that there's no crops. There's a lack of crops. And because there's a lack of crops, there's a lack of food. Even if they have animals, the animals are going to die because there's a lack of water. So, drought and summer sun, great link with one another. Because the heat obviously also contributes to drought. Then we have humanity. And here, grade 12, it speaks of the gentleness they have with one another, the kindness that they have with one another, the way they approach one another. And then the last one, hope. Hope that is brought upon from the people because they know if they pray, there's hope. There's hope in the narrator's life when she wants to learn geography and English. She wants to be educated. So there's a hope from this little girl that she's going to get out of her circumstances. She does tell her she does not want to be like her sister who has a child. So there's some sense of hope in our narrator. Coming back to the idea of the summer sun. At first I told you, we all know the saying, the sun will shine again. Hope is what she has. Because tomorrow will be better than today. And if it's not, we note our narrator is trying her best to improve herself and her mind to have a better tomorrow. Because she herself does not want to endure what her people are currently enduring in Africa. Our next part would be the fur coat. Now here, grade 12, we note that the symbolism around the fur coat. Obviously, if you have a fur coat, it means you have some sort of social status. You have money. There's wealth, so you can afford a fur coat. So when we look at the idea of Molly wanting a fur coat, it comes back to that idea of social status. But obviously we know that Molly's conflicted. Whether she wants it, whether she doesn't want it, it sort of gives this idea that females don't always know what they want. But Molly has particular reasoning why she wants a fur coat. And she makes mention of different types of fur coats. She also comes across as a very plain woman, but she wants a fur coat over her plain clothing, contributing to this idea of some sort of status when I'm going to be amongst people when I wear the fur coat. When we look at the setting, we note that it is an island during the day and night. So we note when her husband Paddy comes home and when they have this conversation around the fur coat. Our theme, keeping up with the Joneses. Grade 12, I've experienced with my grade 12 learners over the past few years. We don't know what keeping up with the Joneses mean. So let me explain to you. Now, for example, the Joneses stay across the road, but mom is friends with the neighbors, right? So mom hears that Aunt Sarah said they are going to extend the house. And they're going to put in a pool. They're going to install a pool and a new braai area. Very nice. So mom comes home to tell dad, we need to do the following. And a few days later, dad speaks to Aunt Sarah's husband across the road. And he indicates what they're going to do. And dad realizes that we now need to keep up with the Joneses. But the Joneses have the money. We don't. That is the concept of keeping up with the Joneses. Doing things to keep up with other people. But coming back to this idea, keeping up with the Joneses comes back to a certain social status we want to uphold. We do not have to, but we want to uphold because other people have this particular status and we want to do the same thing. That is exactly what Molly wants. Molly wants a fur coat so she could fit in when they now go to garden parties. So she wants to fit in. That is what it's about, to keep up with the Joneses, fitting in, right? When we look at the characters, Paddy Maguire, I think he's a very, very reasonable husband, right? He's the husband we know to Molly. He was involved in the IRA, and this obviously led to him being in prison. He was promoted to secretary to Minister of Roads and Railways. But very reasonable. The moment Molly comes and explains that she wants a fur coat, he agrees. He's okay with this idea that she gets a fur coat. He even tells her where to go and purchase the fur coat. She's the one that is conflicted. But it is also obvious to us, grade 12, as the readers, that somehow he avoids conflict with his wife because he agrees to it, but he also wants what's best for her, noting the fact that she looked after the children while he was in prison. So automatically it gives us the idea that Paddy is a very reasonable man. He's okay with his wife getting a fur coat, keeping in mind that they haven't had much before. He's got a promotion now, so there's funds for her to get this fur coat. And he is okay with it. She obviously tells him that he's mean and that he's rude, which we do not see. We do not see it at all, but she sees this because in his quietness he responds and says, it's okay. But she does not, and she thinks that he is mocking her. Mrs. Molly Maguire. Yes, we know she's the wife, but she's also a very plain woman, right? Paddy makes mention of the fact that straps and painted jades that never lifted a finger for God, which means she's not like these women. She's a plain woman. She looks after her children. She is at home. She, even before she got married, worked in her father's shop. So we see that she's a very plain woman, which somehow begs the question, why would you want a fur coat then? Why is it then important for you to have this fur coat? So we need to understand this in some way. So there, she wants a fur coat. She makes mention of a mink, a sable, a broadtail. These are obviously different types of fur coats. Which gives us the idea, the moment she mentions this, she has done some sort of research, and even Paddy sees this. Which means that she's familiar with this. She wants this fur coat. And as a plain woman, it is somewhat strange that this is what she wants. But she gives the reasoning, obviously, that she wants it. Why? Because she looked after the kids. The other reason, obviously, is the fact that so she can fit in when they go to garden parties due to her husband's promotion. At the climax of the story, Molly calls Paddy mean and says he didn't want her to buy a fur coat, which we note this is not true. Because he's the one that even wants her to go and buy the fur coat. He even tells her where to go and purchase the fur coat. So it does not give us the idea that Paddy does not agree. She decides not to buy the fur coat and to wear a Macintosh instead. But we noted already the inner conflict within her, whether she wants it or whether she doesn't want it. So she's very indecisive for someone who knows exactly what fur coats there are, which makes no sense. So it comes back to the idea of keeping up with the Joneses. Because she now wants to be like other women dressed in these fur coats to fit in at the party. Understanding now why she has inner conflict. Because wearing clothes, grade 12, to fit in, but your personality does not fit in, makes no sense. I cannot dress up and go there and put up this facade and be this particular person when it is not you. So she realizes at the end that she's not going to buy it at all, and she's rather going to wear a Macintosh instead. So it's important that we note that this fur coat, indicating some sort of status, grade 12, to her it's an indication it's what she deserves at this time. So when reading the story, you need to interpret it from that perspective. That this is given, or she wants it, for particular reasoning. And the main one being actually to fit in, keeping up with the Joneses. So you need to, when you read the story again, try to analyze it and see it from that perspective of keeping up with the Joneses. And when we come back looking at village people, the difference there of humanity and hope of people who have nothing. People who have nothing, and yet it is those people, grade 12, who still come across with kindness to one another, who still has hope that tomorrow might be different. Comparing this to Molly, who now, because of her husband's promotion, wants a fur coat. So when we look at these two stories, we see humanity and kindness, and we see a woman who wants a fur coat due to a promotion, and keeping this idea she needs to fit in at a garden party, or wherever they will be invited to due to the fact that her husband got a promotion. I hope that you will look at these stories from this perspective, and all your stories, analyze them and see them from a different perspective. And remember, to practice these, download your past question papers. Go onto the Department of Basic Education website, download those papers, practice, keeping in mind they're not going to ask those questions as is, but rather practicing to get a better understanding of these stories and of the questions. Thank you.